Scandi Pitches, Scandi Singers.
Hello and welcome back to Scandi Pitches. Scandi Singers talk singing. How are you feeling today, Therese?
I'm okay, thank you. I've had quite a busy day, but still alive and happy to be busy in a time when a lot of people aren't very busy. So,
I mean,
I'm
present
delighted
company,
to be here.
present company included. I have very little to do these days, but I am, going to be moving over to Norway for a few months. So, well, we'll see.
Yeah, you'll have a lovely time, obviously.
Yeah, well, I'll try to, but it's, there's not much work at the moment. But okay, so today we are going to be talking about something that's maybe slightly controversial, something that in my research I found a lot of differing opinions on, and that is the support.
Abstract and contentious.
Abstract and contentious is right, yeah. And I think now this is very much a singing technique sort of thing. And I think I should probably immediately say that although I am, although I've had training and I'm, I would consider myself a trained singer, I've definitely not had the kind of specialized training where I'll be able to, speak with great authority. When it comes to stuff like the support, people will go quite in depth and talk about this muscle, that muscle, etc. And I should to clarify that I'm no expert on the subject, and you can't be using my opinions as as the gospel when it comes to this topic. But it is still something that all my singing teachers have talked about, and which I do, have a sort of an opinion about. And what about you, Therese? So what do you consider the support to be?
Yeah, well, again, abstract and contentious, I would say. I also have had many singing teachers who have talked about the support. But to be honest, it's definitely not very present in my current vocal coaching that I'm getting, but that might also be because it's not really something that I have had to work with a lot as such. Sorry to sound like that sounds a bit awful, but it's getting the support activated, so to speak, and getting my body activated has come quite naturally to me, I think. Mm-hmm. So, but then again, it's the support, I think, from sort of the thing that makes the most sense to me in terms of what I've been taught is more. It's more about your whole body and the activation of your whole body. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think a lot of the time when people talk about support, it's some sort of imaginary push from the stomach type thing, which you hear a lot, I think, when you're doing singing as a child, maybe quite early years, that sort of, and there is a confusion between support in terms of your voice being supported by what's going on in your body, and support in terms of pushing and forcing something, be it with breath or with holding your stomach in a particular way, or whatever it may be. So I think there is a lot of, and I definitely think there should be contention about that kind of support. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this is and again, I keep bringing up this thing where you've been singing your whole life, whereas I started, fairly late. Mm-hmm. But in fact, this sounds extremely similar to my experience. Yeah. And it has. So I've had, in my musical upbringing, I've had 4 different singing teachers. The first one essentially had to fix all the bad singing technique that I developed because I started singing on my own. The second then could build on that, and then it's probably the third and fourth which are the most interesting here because they had very different ideas. So my third singing teacher was an operatic baritone singer, very, very good operatic singer. I mean, I should hope when I'm his age that I will have a voice that's half as good because he was, he is a brilliant singer. But he did kind of subscribe to this idea of you push, you breathe in as much as you can, fill up, to the brink, and then you push. Now this is in contrast to my fourth and current vocal coach, who considers support to be something that isn't important, that isn't really a thing that you need to be concentrating on, because she'll the school that she studies in, which is Estel. And again, excuse me for anyone who does Estel, but I might get this completely wrong because I'm no Estel expert. But essentially, support is a very, very small thing in the Estel singing technique. And and having had so many different approaches thrown at me has meant that I kind of have had to work through a lot of stuff and figure it out. And I think I've arrived kind of where you are, where I don't consider support to be something that I do by engaging a certain muscle, but rather something maybe a bit more overall about the way that I, breathe and carry the voice. That's half conscious, half subconscious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's a relationship, isn't it? Like the relationship between your voice and your body. And it's like sometimes it's quite hard to say which comes first. But my vocal coach, also Estel, not the same as your vocal coach, but they have worked a lot together and know each other very well.
Small community.
Indeed. But I really actually like when I started singing for this vocal coach and started getting into Estel. Again, I'm also very much not an expert and sort of, but it's so as a model for singing, it's so no nonsense, and I really appreciate it. It's all about the sort of physiological thing that is singing and what actually happens in your body. And and in spite of thinking a lot of the time that I'm quite an abstract person, like I really love not talking in abstracts when it comes to voice. So that's something that I really like. And again, like similarly with my vocal coach, it's not really like the support is not an essential part. It's more about, well, what are you actually doing and what is actually happening and what do you actually need to do with your vocal folds, with your body to produce a certain sound. And then just, and then do that, which I think is really makes a lot of sense to me anyway.
Yeah, I also, because of course I am probably, it's no secret that I am kind of a very analytical, scientific sort of person. And so of course something like Estel, which is, all about physiognomic features of the body. Is that the correct word?
Yeah.
Something like, sorry, it's like astronomy and astrology. It could be like completely different things.
Physiological is a thing, isn't it?
But yeah, essentially it's just you move this muscle here, you do this with this muscle, you stand like this. It's very.
I think
we
all know what you mean.
Yeah. I want to be exact. I want to be able to say exactly what I mean. Which I appreciate because it's less ambiguous, and that was the impression I got searching for information on support. Some things kind of were the same, some were different. So first of all, support is a word that comes from Italian, the Italian word appoggio, which coming from the word appoggiare, which means support. There we go. And this is an opera term. This is something that is not new. It is something that people have been talking about, for a really, 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 really long time. And so essentially I just had a look around the internet to see what do people say about it. Now, what's great about living in the time that we do is that there's a lot of good information out available for free on the internet. I did quickly notice that there's a lot of different information, and then it becomes more of a problem. For instance, one site that I looked at was talking about it being a combination of three things: breath control, vocal fold resistance, and resonance. So like your mouth shape. And yes, that sounds like things that are important. Now, I'm always a little bit careful when I go through stuff on the internet to look at what's this coming from, what's the source. This kind of within singing. So you'll talk about certain voice models, and so Esther will be one of them, where there's a standardized approach. Then you've got lots of people trained in the same way to teach the same approach to singing. And with singing, there are so many, that makes it also quite confusing if you have different voice models talking about support and using different different meanings to that word. But I did find that breath control was a common denominator with all the different. I'll say some of the other ones in a bit. But did you find when you started singing that breath control just happened without you having to think about it? You breathe exactly how you need to breathe. No need to worry about it.
Yeah, because I was 1.5. Probably. Yeah, actually, I've never, breath control as such wasn't anything that I thought of until much later. So I was singing for many, many years and didn't feel that I necessarily had a problem with breath control. I still wouldn't say I have a problem, but it's something that I'm maybe more conscious of now. But also, like, as soon as you start taking lessons, I think breath control becomes a really important part of it, and breathing in general. So I definitely have trained to breathe more efficiently and use my breasts. Use my breasts. Use my breath. Use my breath more efficiently when singing, not my breasts. Crikey. That's a whole other type of singing that is also wonderful to do, and which I have done. But anyway, how to move on from there. Definitely is something that I sort of had to learn to think about. And I think that's something that a lot of people say, like a lot of, not to generalize, but a lot of like pop and rock artists who have just sort of sung and been in their bands, and then as adults start taking singing lessons. Like I've heard a lot of people say like that's then felt really foreign, and you do sort of reevaluate. You reevaluate your approach to something, or you become aware of things that you do, and yeah, I don't know. A lot of sort of singing training, I suppose, is about becoming aware of habits and changing and breaking habits that aren't useful to you when you're singing, or for that matter, that are completely like actually impact your singing in a negative way.
Yeah. And I again, because I started out, teaching singing to myself, and of course teaching myself really bad technique, I did struggle with breath control for a really long time, and I still won't claim that I'm a master of it, but I've certainly come a long way, and it is something that did absolutely not come naturally to me, and I can see why it would be a common denominator for different definitions of support, because how much you breathe, how you control the exhalation, and also, how that creates resistance in the vocal folds. Those are like very quite principal things when it comes to singing, because that's how you regulate. I mean, of course, you don't think about it that way, but that is how you create the sound until you get up here, and then you got to shape the mouth and all that stuff. But I can see why that would be an important element in something, and in this case, they will talk about it as being support and breath control. And it's, we don't really breathe the same way when we talk as when we sing, because, when I'm speaking here, I don't really need that much breath. I just take a little breath, and it's not like I have to carry through a long phrase or anything. Whereas when I breathe, I might have to, carry on quite a long phrase, and then I need to control that exhalation quite carefully.
But then again, it's like, it's also, like, it depends on the songs, obviously, but like, that is also something that's quite interesting to work with a lot of the time, like trying to, it depends on what school you're of and what you think and how you think of singing. But if you think of singing as sort of prolonged speech, which I think is a really nice approach, and like I think I always sort of strive to sing in the way that seems the most natural somehow, and that's especially if there's words, and then actually quite useful to sort of and I think I try and do that with everything, to speak the songs at pitch, and then sometimes the breathing, like, because you breathe so naturally when you speak. So it's something that I've been taught as a really useful way to work through a song, like, because when you're breathing automatically and organically when you're speaking, and you always have enough air to say what you need to say without thinking.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to claim that I always have enough air to get through everything I need to say.
Well, fair.
But
I'm not sure I do either.
No, well, but I see what you mean. Oops. Okay, so I mean, breath control, clearly seems to be a common denominator for the way different people I looked at would describe support. The next one, and this one used a lot of complicated terminology that I didn't quite always understand, and this just comes from me not knowing, all the names of the muscles in my body, but it was very detailed, and it did, it did a really, really detailed description, and I did get a lot of useful information from it. And they, I'll probably add the link to it because I thought it was, out of the ones I found, that was probably the most rounded one, even though the language barrier might be a problem. It said, support is being able to control the amount of air being expelled from the lungs during singing tasks and to maintain a steady flow of air and thus create a steady singing tone. So again, this concept of breath control. And they then divided it into two different approaches. And the first one being the one you mentioned at the start, which is the tensing of the abdominal muscles, pushing the sound out. And indeed, that is one that I've used, and I don't anymore. I think it probably got me going because maybe not because it was helping me directly, but because it made me think a lot more about the breath. And maybe that's important as well. The second one, which is the classical one, appoggio, is singing. So the way they do it in classical music, Western classical art music, is to sing in, trying to kind of use your normal inhalation gesture, if you will, with your muscles. Then when you're about to sing, you hold it like that, and you try to kind of keep it there the whole time, so that whenever you need to breathe, you don't have to move the muscles much. And then you breathe quite low in the tummy, low in the stomach, low in the lungs, to keep the diet. There's also the stuff about where the diaphragm is, and that also kind of rang a bell to me when I read it, because my operatic teacher, he was not teaching me to sing opera, but he was an operatic singer, was also talking about keeping especially your lower ribs kind of out, and keeping them there. And then
all my opera teachers did as well.
Yeah, and I think
fill your lungs, expand your ribs.
Expanding the ribs and all that stuff. Keeping them out. And yeah, that I can kind of recognize a lot of that from what I was taught then. And again, it's not quite what I do, but I think also having, kind of gone on to a very different kind of approach to the support, there might be stuff there that I'm doing unconsciously just from having, done it for years and years and years now. You just kind of, you start to do stuff, you start to do stuff unconsciously. And so I won't claim that I'm not, I'm probably still tensing a bit in the abdominals, because I was told to do that for so long that, it's really hard to fight against your muscle memory. But at the same time, that's not taking my attention, if you will.
No, exactly. And also, like, that's the thing as well of it's fine for. I mean, everything is fine. Like if you find a way to do what you need to do, and you don't hurt yourself doing it, like it's fine. But I think it's also like what I'm sort of being taught as well is you can't really stop muscles from reacting, and it is to a degree it's a full body experience, and like other things in your body can react, and singing is such a, especially when you're performing, you do all sorts of things, and you have all sorts of things that you have to think about that aren't just producing the sound with your voice. Like you might be moving, you might have full-on choreographies, and sometimes it's hard as well to know what happens from what.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but I always get the urge to burp whenever I sing.
I do not get that urge.
Oh, I get it so much. It's really bad. And then, I don't know, when I sing, that's when my mouth creates the most spit for some reason.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I mean, that's probably true for me as well, but like it doesn't really, so far, let's say, it hasn't had that particular effect on me.
Yeah. Okay, so one last site that I looked at. Now, this is where someone said that it has very little to do with the breathing, and it's a kind of unconscious muscular process where there's the muscles that are sit kind of near your lungs and stuff that are working, and you control them, and that's kind of how you then obtain that breath control or that support, but that the breathing, trying to control the breathing itself, wasn't part of it. Again, it seemed kind of a little bit confusing to me.
That's probably about what I was trying to say, but just expressed more eloquently.
Was that eloquent?
I guess so. Eloquent, if you understand it. I don't know. I'm not sure I do, but like I'm guessing it has a little bit to do with this sort of thing of trying to achieve a more like organic or natural way of breathing. So like, for example, using the example of speech and the sort of breathing you might achieve from speaking through the song at pitch, for example, and then you kind of, because I think there you kind of, I do think that when we're speaking, we activate certain things and we do certain things with our bodies quite organically that we don't necessarily do in singing. That being said, not all of us have perfect speaking technique either. And there are definitely stuff that can be done to,
It's weird, isn't it? I've been a teacher for many years, and I do still find that it's the talking that will wreck my voice, not the singing. If I don't, concentrate. And whereas with singing, I mean, it used to be when I was starting out, it could get quite rough over the course of an evening. Nowadays, that doesn't happen anymore. But it's weird because, again, we might kind of assume that with speaking, that's natural. You do it all the time. It's fine. And then you can still develop certain bad habits when it comes to speaking. There is, and I kind of do it a little bit myself, is you can do that thing where you speak and your vocal fry, and it actually is not very good for your voice.
Yeah. But I suppose breathing when speaking, though, tends to be quite organic, regardless of how well you use your voice and how your technique is. I'm so aware of it now. That's the thing, though. I consider, and again, I'm not Knut, the amazing guru of singing technique who knows how to do everything. But when I think about support now, I think about controlling my breath, and just I think of it more as a thing happening here, even though I know that, of course, your lungs are here and all that stuff's happening here. But I am thinking more of maintain that stream and just kind of concentrate on it. And then, there's more stuff happening as well. That, you're creating the resonance, and that will feel a certain way. If you're used to, singing, you will know that, okay, there's resonance feels right. And then I kind of find that the way I do support now is I will
I'll sing, I'll locate the resonance, and I'll just concentrate on that. And through that, I think almost like unconsciously control the breathing to make sure that that is maintained throughout. So again, it has become more of an unconscious thing that happens while doing something conscious.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. But that is to support something, I think. If you're giving your tone the best circumstances in which to exist, make a sound, then that is supporting it, regardless of what that means. Which I'm guessing is like, part reason why there are so many methods that people subscribe to, and so many convictions of what is absolute. But at the end of the day, singing is so individual, and it's so personal, and your voice is so personal, and what works for one person might not actually work for another, both in terms of like how you talk about it and how you address it and explain it or think about it, but also, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, because we have certain kind of stylistic ideals that we look for, in the West, and we are kind of we're a little bit of a result of what was the prevailing, idea in our countries during, the 16, 17, 1800s. But you look at other countries where you listen to traditional singing, and it might to us sound like it's a bit strained, and yet that's considered to be good singing there. So it's also the cultural heritage. What is considered to be a pleasant singing singing voice where you're from, and this could vary a lot. I mean, you have this concept in Sweden as well of the calling milkmaids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cow
that's a
calling.
thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Kulning.
Yeah, kulok. And if
You've heard me do it in a concert once.
Yeah, you did, didn't you? And what's great about it is if you think about it from like if you think about it in terms of like a beautiful classical choral singing, it sounds very, very piercing and almost a bit like horrible, but that's kind of the point as well. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, you're meant to bring the cows, and they don't necessarily listen to what would normally be considered a pleasant sound. So.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but then that could also be a supported sound. It just kind of manifests in a different way because of stylistic reasons.
Definitely. And also, like, it's got to be said, well, it doesn't have to be said, but I'm going to say it, that there are a lot of, like, I would say maybe popular genres, and where a lot of people will think that the most amazing singers are the ones who sound like they are pushing themselves to the limit and are about to die. Yeah. And that is, it's a style. Yeah. And it's not necessarily always what I'm into, but when it's used sparingly, like, sometimes we are about to die, and that should be conveyed in music too. But I think there are efficient ways of doing it that don't wreck you.
I mean, you could talk about stuff like growl singing, which is definitely one you need to be super careful about because you can wreck your voice. Of course, that's also, that's more of a different cultural singing style.
And you need superb technique to be doing that.
Absolutely,
really,
if you want to do it your whole life.
It's incredible. Yeah. If you want to do it for a little while, then go for it.
Okay, so let's quickly revise or summarize. So support, it's what we would call a contentious topic where there's loads of different opinions about what it is and how to achieve it. A common denominator seems to be breath control and breath management, and there'll be varying degrees, this great word, varying degrees of muscle involvement, conscious or subconscious, but it is something that is probably, something that you do when you sing well. You maybe don't think about it very actively once you're kind of at a stage where you're a good singer.
I suppose. And also like support in very brief terms, I suppose, is giving the voice adequate help to do what it needs to do in what is as an efficient way as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a good description. All right, well, I hope that people find that useful, maybe illuminating. I don't know. I'm gonna post the link to the one site that I thought was probably describing support best and in the most kind of neutral way. I will say that they did strike me as being a bit more like leaning a bit more towards the classical definition, but still I thought they were at least trying to be a bit impartial about it. Be sure to share this video with your friends if you think they'll find it useful, and like our channel to see more of our videos. And we will see you in another week for another episode of Scandi Pitches.